What if I told you that during the height of the Cold War, the United States military drafted a plan so shocking that it included staging terror attacks on its own soil? A plan involving bombings, hijackings, and even sinking U.S. naval vessels, all to frame another nation and justify an invasion. This isn't a conspiracy theory, it's a documented historical reality. This is the unsettling story of Operation Northwoods, a moment when power and patriotism collided, testing the moral fabric of governance and leaving a chilling legacy. The Cold War context, a nation on edge. To understand the genesis of Operation Northwoods, we need to revisit the early 1960s, a period when Cold War tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union were at their peak. Every diplomatic and military maneuver risked sparking a nuclear catastrophe. Within this fraught atmosphere, Cuba emerged as a critical flashpoint. In 1959, Fidel Castro, a fiery young revolutionary, overthrew the US-backed dictator Fulgencio Batista. This seismic shift disrupted decades of American economic control over Cuba, including lucrative industries like sugar and infrastructure. Worse still, from Washington's perspective, Castro openly aligned with communist ideologies and strengthened ties with the Soviet Union. Cuba's proximity, just 90 miles off the Florida coast, exacerbated U.S. fears. The idea of Soviet influence so close to American shores was intolerable. The Cuba problem became a top priority for U.S. policymakers, who were determined to neutralize Castro's regime at any cost. Failed solutions, economic sanctions, and the Bay of Pigs. The U.S. government initially imposed economic sanctions, hoping to cripple Cuba's economy and weaken Castro's hold. However, this strategy backfired when the Soviet Union stepped in, providing Cuba with financial and military aid. When economic pressure failed, the United States turned to covert action. The infamous Bay of Pigs invasion in April 1961 was a bold but disastrous attempt to overthrow Castro. The CIA trained 1,500 Cuban exiles for an assault on Cuba's southern coast, intending to ignite an anti-Castro uprising. But the invasion was a catastrophe. Cuban forces swiftly repelled the attackers, capturing or killing most of them within 3 days. This humiliating failure not only bolstered Castro's position but also embarrassed the newly elected President John F. Kennedy, who reluctantly approved the operation. The fiasco left U.S. military leaders desperate for a decisive victory against Cuba. The birth of Operation Northwoods. In the aftermath of the Bay of Pigs debacle, the U.S. military devised an audacious and morally reprehensible strategy, Operation Northwoods. On March 13, 1962, the Joint Chiefs of Staff presented a memorandum to Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara. Titled Justification for U.S. Military Intervention in Cuba, the document proposed a series of false flag operations, fabricated attacks designed to provoke public outrage and justify a U.S. invasion of Cuba. The proposals outlined in the plan were both detailed and shocking. Simulated attacks on U.S. bases. The military would stage attacks on American facilities like Guantanamo Bay, causing damage while minimizing casualties. Bombings and hijackings. Civilians would be targeted in staged bombings or hijacked airplanes, with evidence planted to implicate Cuba. Sinking a U.S. ship. Similar to the sinking of the USS Maine in 1898, this act would serve as a rallying cry for war. Terror on American soil. Explosions in crowded public spaces would create widespread fear and animosity toward Cuba. Each scenario was meticulously designed to paint Cuba as an aggressor, galvanizing American public opinion in favor of military action. The moral dilemma. The sheer audacity of Operation Northwoods forces us to grapple with a haunting question. How could leaders tasked with protecting their citizens justify terrorizing them? For the Joint Chiefs, the ends seemed to justify the means. In their view, Castro's communist regime represented an existential threat that warranted extreme measures. However, the plan's callous disregard for human life and democratic principles underscored a chilling reality. Unchecked power, when fueled by fear, can lead to unimaginable actions. Kennedy's rejection and the memo's fate. Thankfully, Operation Northwoods never came to pass. When the plan reached President Kennedy, he was reportedly appalled. He categorically rejected the proposal, refusing to authorize such a deceitful and dangerous operation. Some historians speculate that Kennedy's resistance to hawkish military strategies contributed to growing tensions between him and the military establishment. These tensions would later surface during the Cuban Missile Crisis, further straining his relationship with the Pentagon. Legacy and revelation. For decades, Operation Northwoods remained a closely guarded secret. It wasn't until the late 1990s, during a wave of declassifications, that the American public learned of this dark chapter. The revelations shocked many, serving as a stark reminder of how fear and ambition can distort ethical judgment. Today, Operation Northwoods stands as a sobering example of the lengths to which governments might go in the name of national security. It's a cautionary tale that underscores the importance of transparency, accountability, and vigilance in a democracy. Conclusion: Lessons from Northwoods. The story of Operation Northwoods is more than a historical footnote. It's a stark warning about the dangers of unchecked power and the ethical compromises leaders may consider during times of crisis. It challenges us to remain vigilant, ensuring that patriotism is never twisted into a justification for deception and harm. As we reflect on this chilling episode, let it serve as a reminder that the principles of democracy and human decency must never be sacrificed, no matter the stakes. Thank you for exploring this dark chapter of history with me. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. Together, let's keep the lessons of history alive.